A Belt and Road project in Iran exploded. Signs the CCP is losing its grip. And is the CCP building a hydrogen bomb? That and more on this week's China News Headlines. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. This episode is sponsored by Surfshark. Whenever you go online, you really should be using a VPN like Surfshark to cover your tracks and protect your identity. I'll tell you more in a little bit. China's Belt and Road Initiative is proving once again the quality of made in China. There was a massive explosion at an Iranian port, a Belt and Road Initiative project. So far, the blast has killed at least 70 people, wounded thousands of others, and caused enormous damage to the port. No one knows for sure what caused the explosion at this point, but there are speculations that it was caused by mishandling a shipment of solid rocket fuel material, possibly from China. And since that rocket fuel would violate U.S. sanctions shortly after the explosion, the U.S. Treasury sanctioned a China-Iran network supplying it. China is reportedly developing an advanced hydrogen bomb. Last Sunday, the South China Morning Post reported that researchers in the country successfully conducted a controlled field test of a non-nuclear H-bomb. The bomb was allegedly able to trigger powerful chemical chain reactions without nuclear materials and create a fireball with a temperature of over 1800 degrees Fahrenheit. So the CCP is definitely preparing for something, if only there were constant, aggressively obvious warning signs to let us know what. According to Radio Free Asia, a Chinese man who displayed pro-democracy banners is now in detention. Mei Shilin, aged 27, hung the banners on a Chengdu overpass on April 15th. They say, without political reform, there can be no national rejuvenation. The people do not want a party with unbound power, and China does not need someone to dictate her path because democracy is the way. Before hanging the banners, he sent his ID card to 2 overseas Chinese individuals, stating that he had been preparing for this action for over a year. He also insisted on staying in China despite their warnings. The CCP is also censoring posts about the banners and images of them online because, of course, they are. And after the break, Ukraine sanctions China. Welcome back. Last month, we did a story on how Britain's biggest steel company, British Steel, ended up in the hands of a Chinese company called Jinhua. The story ended with Jinhua threatening to close down Britain's last 2 remaining blast furnaces and fire thousands of workers after it didn't get the bailout offer that it wanted from the British government. That would have left Britain the only G7 country unable to produce so-called virgin steel, weakening it economically, infrastructurally, and militarily. Which I'm sure wasn't intentional on the part of China, just a Bob Ross-style happy accident. But lo and behold, the British government has swooped in to save the day, taking emergency control of the day-to-day operations of British Steel, with nationalization still on the table. The ministers even came in during the Easter holiday to do it. You know it's bad when British ministers have to miss out on holiday time. Volodymyr Zelensky claims Chinese nationals are helping Russia produce drones. Which is crazy because China says they're neutral, Scout's honor. This accusation came just days after Zelensky also accused the CCP of providing gunpowder and weapons to Moscow for its ongoing invasion. At this point, I wouldn't be surprised to learn that she kisses Putin on the cheek every morning and says, "Good luck at war today, honey." And so Ukraine is sanctioning 3 Chinese companies. The 3 companies will no longer be able to do business in the war-torn country. This is yet another bit of information in Zelensky's ongoing attempts to expose Chinese involvement in the Russia-Ukraine war, coming less than a month after Ukraine claimed to have captured Chinese nationals fighting in the occupied territories of Ukraine. Zelensky is also accusing Russia of having stolen the drone technologies from China, saying, "We believe that it may be that Russia made an agreement with these citizens outside the agreement with the Chinese leadership, stole these technologies." Which wouldn't be surprising given that there are other reports of Chinese nationals buying Russian military gear, specifically bulletproof vests and uniforms, and selling cheap knockoff versions back to Russians, with the knockoffs even found in Ukraine. Some analysts are questioning if he's softening his tone on China by suggesting Russian theft. In any case, he may be hoping that these revelations could sow division between the no-limits partners, and maybe the spark between them will finally start to fade. But maybe not, because according to a Chinese official, China and Russia are talking about building a nuclear plant on the moon to power a lunar station. The Russian Space Agency said last year that it plans on building the nuclear reactor on the surface of the moon by 2035 in partnership with the China National Space Administration, or CNSA. China hasn't officially announced participation in the project, but the Chinese official including this nuclear plant in his presentation sure makes it seem like China supports the idea. Because why settle for border disputes on Earth when you can do it across the entire cosmos? And speaking of border disputes, China has seized a tiny sandbank in the South China Sea that has always been a part of Chinese territory since ancient times. This was part of the Spratly Islands, territory claimed by both the Philippines and China. It's strategically located near some of the Philippines' most important military outposts, meant to monitor and deter Chinese aggression in the region. But the Philippines responded by sending its own forces to plant their flag, marking this as the beginning of the most high-stakes game of capture the flag of all time. Totally unrelated, the Philippines is showing more support than ever for Taiwan. The Philippines has loosened a decades-old policy that tightly restricted official engagement with Taiwan, signaling a recalibration of its China policy. On top of that, Manila is even eyeing military ties with Taiwan. China shouldn't be mad, though. They consider Taiwan a part of Chinese territory since ancient times. So really, the Philippines is just working with the Chinese military, right? Right? All this is happening amidst a joint drill hosted by the Philippines, which includes their own armed forces alongside American and Australian troops. China is very worried about these drills, especially since the U.S. has delivered massive military aid packages to Manila in recent months, including sophisticated missile systems that can hit mainland China. You know, I wonder if, even for a second, China thought, man, is this how other countries feel when we do our drills by them? Maybe we should knock it off, because I don't like this feeling at all. No, instead, Beijing has responded in the most predictable manner possible, summoning the Filipino ambassador to voice its concern and sending drones and surveillance aircraft near both Taiwan and the Philippines. Just another day in the South China Sea. The only shocking thing about this is that they have any drones left for themselves and haven't given them all to Russia for the war they're totally neutral in, Scout's honor. And now, back to the trade war. China Southern Airlines is canceling a Boeing 787 sale amid trade tensions with the U.S. The company operates 10 Boeing 787 aircraft and plans to sell the planes in order to get brand new ones to service important routes. But with new concerns about the ability to get new planes, they decided against selling the old ones. I'd be careful about that. Boeing isn't known for its long-lasting quality. But the U.S. is hitting back. Ford has halted shipments of its vehicles to China amid the tariffs. Although U.S.-built engines and transmission to China are expected to continue, the shipment of fully assembled vehicles to the country are on pause. Most of Ford's products end up being sold in the U.S. anyways, so it might not be that big of a deal. But the U.S. has other ways of making life difficult for the CCP in the trade war, such as laying out plans to hit Chinese ships with increased port fees, with an exemption for the Caribbean, mainly thanks to lobbying. Fees will be based on how many vehicles each Chinese ship is carrying, how many containers are on board, and the weight of the cargo. And they're not even going to give them the convenience of an easy pass system for these tolls. Brutal. China, meanwhile, is trying to redirect US-bound ships to Europe to inflict harm on US consumers. But that's congesting many European ports, which is the second most annoying naval conflict China is currently engaged in. But it seems in the trade war, China blinked first. China has quietly rolled back retaliatory tariffs on some US-made semiconductors. Remember, China is losing. Don't let the propaganda trick you into believing otherwise. Just rolled out with a whole video about that earlier this week. Amidst the trade war, there are also signs that both Washington and Beijing might be ready to start talks. Even the president has hinted at softening China tariffs. So who knows? This all might just be another game of Trump 4D chess. Though, considering how China's economy is toppling, it's more like 4D Jenga. But President Trump has another tariff-related problem closer to home to worry about. Kentucky Senator Rand Paul, a fellow Republican. Recent reports suggest that Rand Paul is organizing senators to stop Trump's tariffs on China. Some Republicans, like Paul, claim that the tariffs are harming their free market ideology and ultimately the U.S. economy. But interestingly, Senator Paul's top PAC donor is a major TikTok investor and has hundreds of investments in China. which I'm sure is just another coincidence, another happy Bob Ross-style accident. The donor is Jeff Yass of Pennsylvania, who is a libertarian like Paul, and last month put $8 million into a Paul-affiliated PAC. The $8 million donation brings his total contributions to the Protect Freedom PAC to a total of $30 million, about 80% of receipts since it came into existence in 2017. These donations are coming under scrutiny because he holds a 15% stake in TikTok's China-based parent company, ByteDance. But Paul's bid failed. This is very bad for China. Factories are going to shut down. People will lose their jobs. And you'll have a lot more people saying democracy is the way. And did you know that every time you go online, everything you do is potentially compromised? And that's why the people at Surfshark created a VPN that keeps your internet activity private and secure. If you're not taking active steps to protect yourself, everything you do is being tracked and logged by the websites you visit, your internet service provider, and often by your own government. Using a VPN makes you harder to track. Surfshark has servers you can connect to in over 100 countries, more than any other VPN. That includes a server in the British Virgin Islands, where the law allows companies to not log user data. So stay safe and check out Surfshark. With just one Surfshark account, you can connect as many devices as you want. It also comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Go to surfshark.com/uncensored and use the code uncensored to get up to 4 months extra. The link is in the description below. And again, if you want to see why China is really losing the trade war and why the propaganda saying otherwise is wrong, click on this video. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.